Hi, this is Ron Nutter. Over the past year, I've spent a lot of time writing a series of books to help everybody do some preparedness for when natural disasters strike. Because sometimes if you get caught by one or haven't done much of anything, then you're really left struggling. And let me show you what I mean, because right now while I'm recording this, this is what it's looking like for those that live in the Houston and somewhat into the New Orleans area, although they seem to have been spared at this point. And this is something, there's never a good time to do disaster preparedness. This is not something that's high on anybody's list. But if you do a little bit at a time, then you're ready for just about anything. And it can be, granted, a little overwhelming. And let me illustrate that. Would you rather go through a book this thick, going through the steps, or at least some of the steps that you'd have to go through to be reasonably prepared for disaster, or would you rather go through one like this and deal with just a little bit at a time in baby steps? There's no right or wrong answer. Some of us will go all or nothing, and some will do a little bit over time. But much like a fire drill that you'll have at your company or at your school or at your house of worship, there are things that you'll have to revisit over time. It's not just a one and done situation, but this is something that the more you can do up front to be ready, that you will be in a much better position for when something happens. Right now, the folks in the Houston, Corpus Christi area, that part of Texas, are just getting inundated. The reports I read this morning were expecting upwards of 40 inches of rain over the next few days. And there's only so many places it can go in Texas. I know, I lived there for several years. I spent about 7 years of my life when I lived in another state as a volunteer first responder with emergency management. I've seen what can happen when people aren't prepared. And you don't have to go to school for this. You don't have to attend classes. A lot of it is just simple things that you can do every day. Putting together a first aid kit. Having something, hopefully more than a cell phone, to be communicating with friends and family and having a way to reach out. Having your own source of food. Having plans to be able to quickly leave an area, because this time the early reports were already showing people, as soon as they were starting to discuss people evacuating, getting out of the area, there were a lot of people that were already getting on the road. And that's the good thing to do, because if you wait until the last minute, you're going to find you may not have enough gas in the vehicle, that you're going to be stuck in lines trying to get more gas so that you can get out of the area, and then you'll be sitting on interstates. Even though the plans are in place to, well, in the part of the country that I lived in, if there was an evacuation because of a issue at a nearby military base, they already had plans set up to where interstate would be cut off and you would go all north, all lanes north, or all lanes south. But some areas of the country don't have a lot of infrastructure to where you can do all of that easily. So the more you know the area, and reach out to the people in emergency management in your county. Understand what their plans are, even considering volunteering, because this is one of the agencies that typically is the most undermanned, whatever term you want to use, under-budgeted, because it's seen as something, well, we have to do this, so we'll do what we have to. Any county of any size should be doing 1 to 2 exercises a year with federal and or state authorities so that they know how to properly handle things in the event of an emergency. This is a lot of what caused the breakdown in the New Orleans area with Katrina and Rita. They didn't have that relationship. The federal government has changed some of its mechanisms where they don't necessarily wait to be called in, which is the way they're supposed to. They're supposed to be asked to come in because there's a whole procedure that has to follow. But the more dense you have the population in an area, the more important it is for those resources to be there as quick as possible. So there are things staged in different parts of the country. They can get things flown in, assuming there's a place for the planes to land, but that all takes time. And in the early hours, or even the first day or two, or sometimes three of a disaster, the resources, even if they're nearby, are just getting spun up. They're just being made available. The people coming in are having to assess the situation, even though that they may already have some information. They've got to see where they need to be. They've got to look at what infrastructure is still functioning. Is electricity still there? In most cases, not. Is water still there? Well, it might be, but without electricity, there's not going to be pressure in the lines. What about communications? Again, that's usually one of the first things to go, because cell towers can only exist so long without electricity. While they do have emergency generators, those will only last so long depending on the kind of fuel they are. So I think you're beginning to see the importance of having your own preparations. And it can be some things you're already doing now. If you're an amateur radio operator, you're one leg up on a lot of the preparations, because you've already got some of the radio equipment where you can talk across the town, across the state, across the country, through a satellite. And then this is the thing that those kind of skills are very valuable in times of a disaster. I've seen that firsthand. I had to deal with a week-long ice storm. Power was out and the county was in for most of a week. Had it not been for amateur radio, that helped alleviate some of the issues. While phones were still functioning, they're only going to last so long. And with the amount of ice that was present, those lines are going to come down at some point or be damaged, and that's not going to be quickly repaired. So I think you see that it's, you first build with the strengths that you have, with what you know. Then you delve into what you're not as familiar with. And if you're part of a family, everybody is going to have things that they're good at. So if one member of the family is a ham radio operator or has skills in the electronics area, that's one building block. That's one piece of it. And I cover that, and let me get the book out here, in communications. That is something that it's not just cell phones. Cell phones without towers are basically an electronic paperweight. So there's one company out of, I think it's New York. They got their foundation in 9/11 when they saw that phones could be used for texting. They came up with a device that makes the cell phone think it's tied into a tower, and you can build a whole mesh on the fly network and still be able to talk to people. Text messaging is better than nothing. There are all sorts of radio services. MERS, multiple use radio service, GMRS, general mobile radio service, FERS, family radio service. There's all sorts of things out there that are either unlicensed or are readily that you can get a license for. So the more you can adapt to the changing environment means the more that you can stay in communication. Now, another area, and I saw this happen so much during Katrina and Rita, people were bugging out at a moment's notice, sometimes having only minutes to leave. They had none of the paperwork that you might have to think of for their house mortgage, for their insurance, titles on vehicles. Well, keeping up the bank is a good thing. But if it's an emergency and you need to leave the area, you're probably not going to be able to get to the bank. The bank may already be closed. So having all that readily where you can just grab and go at a moment's notice is going to be something that will be invaluable to you. Again, this is just one piece of the pie. Being able to take care of yourself in an emergency is, I'm talking more than just scrapes and cuts here. I'm talking if you broke an arm, if you had a major gash, knowing what to do. Being first aid certified, whether it's through the Red Cross or there's several other very reputable organizations, the more you can take care of yourself, the better off that you're going to be. Now, there are some situations to where if you live in a remote area, you might need to take some additional precautions and make some additional preparations, such as having a suture kit where you've got a scalpel, you've got sutures, you've got basically have a small medical kit, so that if you have a large wound that's not easily closable, that you can at least suture it up. Will it leave a scar? Well, probably, but would you rather have a scar or bleed to death because you can't get the help? So, and that's something that not everybody would need nor would be comfortable with in doing. But again, it's one of the tools. There are all sorts of things that you can have in a first aid kit, and you may find that there's going to be more than one kit. You may have one that you have with you at the office. You may have one that's with you in your vehicle. You might have one that's at home. There's really no single number of first aid kits that are going to be the best for all concerned. And a lot of it comes back to your training. If you're not sure how to do something, then it's probably a good rule of thumb not to do it. Now, if it's a life and death emergency and it's either if you do something and they live or nothing and somebody dies, well, that's a whole other thing. But that's going to be something you'll deal with at that point in time. So there's, again, no right or wrong way. It's just what you feel comfortable with in doing. And I think you'll find in an emergency you may be capable of a lot more than what you might think. Now, something else to think about in an emergency, and especially if you have to leave your house, is having an emergency kit available. And this can be a whole host of things. You could have a saw that looks like the chain off of a chainsaw, and that could help you cut down some small branches if you had to make a fire. Having some basic tools. This is going to sound hilarious, having a roll or two of duct tape. Duct tape can do a lot of things, and if you've ever watched, I forget what the episode was, the TV show Mythbusters, they showed all the things that could be done with duct tape. So, in an emergency, anything you've got makes you that much better prepared and able to deal with a situation. So it's you can't have everything, and that's where you've got a first aid kit in the vehicle. Well, you probably should have some sort of emergency kit. You can have one at the office. That can be something to get you back to your house or get you to where you've got other supplies. You could have one in the vehicle that supplements what you've got at your office and helps you get that much closer to home. And then you've got a larger one even at home. And there's variations on that. It could be that you've got one that's good for 24 hours. Say you've got an extended power outage, or there's been a small flood in the area and you temporarily can't get out of your neighborhood or out of the building you're in. Okay, you want to at least get you through 24 hours. Then you have like a 48-hour or maybe a 72-hour kit, or maybe you go straight from the 24 to 72 hours. This is something that you will learn over time, and there's no right or wrong way to do this. anything you do, and you're going to hear me say this a lot, anything you do puts you in that much better shape than if you did absolutely nothing. So it's all a step, and what I hope this to be the first of many Facebook Lives that I'm going to do, and I'm hoping to do those sometime probably like a Friday night, Saturday morning. I'm going to look to everybody viewing this to see when works best for you, because I would like to be able to help you. Am I an expert at this? No, but I've been through an ice storm, a tornado, a flood, actually more than one, but only one was really major, a commercial jet crash. So I've had to deal with some things that some people haven't. And if I don't know something, I'll find that out. But the more we can help each other makes it better for everybody to get through something with as minimal as an inconvenience as possible. And there's one other thing that can go a long way to making it through a disaster, and that's having your own source of food. Now, granted, everybody's got the canned stuff from the store, and that's good. But sometimes you need to do your own, and there's several ways that you can do this. I've been working with an arrow garden for several years. A lot of times I just have it make lettuce, because lettuce is something that way I don't have to go to the store and buy it all the time. You can also have the arrow garden grow a combination of tomatoes and peppers so that you can make your own salsa. You can make your own beef jerky. And these are things that I go over in all the books, but I'm glad to have discussions with everybody that we can share what works best for everybody. What may work for me may not work for you, but knowing how to make beef jerky or turkey jerky or chicken jerky, I mean, you name the meat and you can make a jerky with it. Knowing how to do your own canning. You name it, you can can it. Pickles, which, well, I shouldn't say cucumbers become pickles with the brine that you do them in. You can do cold canning, where you don't have to have any hot water at all. You can do pressure canning, which is what you typically have to do for things that have meat in them, because they have to be handled a little bit differently. Where celery, potatoes, those can be done differently. You can do your own jams and preserves. You can make your own fruit leather. So there's a lot of things that you can do to be as self-sufficient as you can. There's no, one thing that says you've got to do all of this, but every step, every skill that you have makes you that much more prepared to make it through a situation. And maybe if you're real close to one of your neighbors, maybe they do part of this and you do part of it. So each one of you is not having to bear the whole mantle of the process. But that may not be an option for some people. So you may find that you need to pretty much do everything, which is not necessarily a bad thing. If you're in a remote area, or if you're in a metropolitan area where you don't know a lot of your neighbors, at least well enough where you feel like you can have this conversation, then you may find yourself in a situation to where it simply makes it easier. And this is not something you have to try to do day one. You're going to hear me say this quite a bit. It's over time. You'll not have all these skills day one. I have never done a stitch of canning in my life, and hopefully here in the next few months, I can either do some of this live while you watch me, or I'll probably do a pre-recorded video, because some of this will take a while to do, and I don't think that you want to sit there and watch your screen for several hours. But to show you that if I can do something and I don't know how to do it, then that gives you the tools that you can do it too. And there's something else that I've not released the book on yet. I hope to do so either later this year or early next year. and that's talking about defending yourself. Now, there are going to be some of you, and I respect those that feel this way, that are not comfortable with having any sort of firearm in the house. Trust me, I was that way for a long time myself. All it took was my house getting broken into, and that fixed it for me. But if you simply are not comfortable with a firearm, I respect it. There are other steps you can take. And I've gone over some of those in this book that I've been working on, and I'm always looking for new options, because in an emergency, 911 is going to be so overwhelmed that you're going to have to take care of yourself, because if the police can get there, it may already be too late. And I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just simply calling things the way that they may be. It may be because of a flood they can't get to you. So again, the more you can do yourself, the better that you're going to be. Going back to the emergency kits, if you are in an office situation, say one of the stairwells gets blocked, starts filling up with smoke, you should probably have your own smoke mask so that you stand a better chance at getting through. And there are some very compact ones, and I'm looking to try to find the best one, I think, for my situation, and you may find something different. That's something you can have in your office emergency kit. Because having it out in your vehicle or having it at home is not going to help you. So it's learning over time where you need to have the different resources, the first aid kit, the emergency kit, where you need to have what kind of items. And that's just, you may experiment. I mean, I have, for example, I've gone through several different bags as I've built different kinds of emergency kits or first aid kits. There's all sorts of schools of thought. One school will say, well, don't get the ones that have the camouflage on them, because people will automatically think that you've got something valuable in there. Well, you should get the flat black ones. At this point, whatever you've got is better than not having anything. What should be in an emergency kit? Well, for somebody, that may be a change or two of clothes, if that. And if you are very concerned about them being wrinkled in an emergency, trust me, having clothes, you're not really going to care about the wrinkles. But getting laundry done on a daily basis probably is not going to be easily done, may not happen at all. That's where companies such as Tide, in any sort of a scale disaster situation, have come up with very long customized trailers that have washers and dryers, and they'll even have a source of water and power so that they can help people get their clothes done. Because as simple as that sounds, if you're in a disaster situation and you have no power, the water may be questionable, having clean clothes is one less thing that you have to worry about. So it's the planning that you'll need to do is not going to be like a one done. I know I said this before, but I'm going to keep repeating some of this. It's something that you will have to do periodically. There may be new resources available. There may be new tools available. It's all in learning what is going to work best for you. So I'm in the process of getting a website set up. The link here right now will forward to the Facebook page where you're seeing this video on. Eventually, I'll start having some more resources available, but in light of the situation that we showed earlier, where the amount of rain that they're looking, this is just out of the Galveston National Weather Service radar, that it's going to be something that is not going to go away soon. I mean, I live in the Midwest, and we've had so much rain that, if we get any rain at all, I start getting water in my house because the ground is so wet it has nowhere to go. So learning how to deal with different situations. I mean, if you have a power outage, then you know how to deal with that. There's different kind of things to deal with. There are things that you'll simply, every time something happens, it can be a learning experience. So as I do each of these videos, and you'll see me still do some recorded videos. Could be some things that simply I can do maybe a little bit easier because I'm testing a new setup as I'm doing this, that you will see close-up shots where it's hard to do when I'm doing a Facebook Live like this, when I'm taking care of the camera and the internet connection and everything else. I'm simply trying to help make sure I get the information out. So, please share this with your friends and family, because the more I can help people makes it that much better for everyone to get through a situation that could be very difficult. Because like the situation in New Orleans with Rita and Katrina, a lot of that loss of life could have been avoided. Some people they wouldn't leave no matter what. But when you start hearing discussions of we may need to think about evacuating, that's probably a good time to start looking to head, because once they start announcing the evacuation plans, all the major arteries out of an area are going to be clogged. And people are going to be hurrying, they're going to be rushing. It's stressful. And with a little bit of planning, it becomes so much easier. Things you'll need to have all sorts of plans in place. Okay, if something happens, how do I get out of the area I'm in? Where are the other family members? Have prearranged meeting places. These are all things that we will go over in the coming weeks. So as you have questions, please put them on my Facebook page to start with, and as I get more resources spun up, then we can figure out the best way to handle it. And I simply want to help you. And with the books I've written, if that's one source of it, that's fine. If we help each other, then we all win in the process. Because the more we can take care of ourselves makes it that much easier to get through a situation. Because I've seen it on more than one occasion, when a disaster happens, the resources are not in there 5 seconds after the storm clears or after the problem resolves. It takes time. And the more that you can make it through without a lot of stress, with having the basics. Are you going to have TV? No. You'll have some sort of probably crank up radio that has the little dynamo on the side that you can power it up, because batteries do go out, and that's another thing that we'll talk about over time, is using rechargeable batteries. But it is, as you start to see, it's not any one thing. It's a series of steps, and sometimes the steps will dovetail together. But it's just, please don't get overwhelmed. That's why I wrote the separate books that I did, is to make it that much easier, so that you're not buying this huge reference book or encyclopedia and then having to go through all the steps. Just do it one step at a time. Do a little bit on a Saturday, or one night when you're in commercials between one of your shows. Every few steps you take, every few minutes you spend, puts you that much better of a position to be ready for when it happens. And if something never happens, then worst you've done is spend a little bit of time, but at least you'll be that much closer to being ready. So you see the link here on the bottom. It's areyoudisasterready.com. When I have future live sessions come out, there will be a link to where you'll be able to get information about the different products I'll be talking about. And I'll be looking to go to some of the emergency preparedness shows, seeing what's out there, because some of it you probably won't want. Some of it may be better for one person versus another. But at least if you're aware of the tools, then you can start making the decisions to be that much ready when something does happen. So I've gone on long enough. I'm going to try to keep these to about 30 minutes. I do appreciate your time, and I'll see you next week.